Today I want to introduce to you someone who, along with Jim Macaulay, was one of the heroes that got me into linguistics and into Chinese linguistics. And I have a nice picture of him. This is Hadge Ross, and I think he is one of the very few linguists that one would call miraculously talented. He is miraculously talented because he is a very poetic soul, and he has found incredibly many beautiful ways of expressing his intuitions about language. And nobody is more lively in his perception of linguistic structure that I have ever known than Hadge Ross. I was hoping to invite him here for you. He is still around in Texas, and he would have loved to come, but he can't. He is going to be in Bangladesh or something. And that's a shame. He's a terrific person, and if you ever come to see anything about nouns, you see, then you will have reference to his great work, which is only 12 pages or something, Endstation Hauptwort, the category squish. Welcome. Now, what that is all about is a concept which he also invented, which is the notion of nouniness. Nouniness, you see, and it's so important to understand that to be a noun is not just to be a noun, you see, but you can be more of it or less of it, according to him. And I would like to give you an example that I created entirely in his spirit, and that looks very Chinese to me. Let's look at the word surprise. And first you have the verb surprise, right? He surprised everyone. Then you have the present participle. Surprising others is difficult, and you begin already to smell the nouniness. Can you get it? You know, it's not quite, kosher. You see what I mean? This verb. Surprising others. You see, you can sort of see something fishy already. And of course, John Robert Ross, Hadge Ross, loved this kind of phenomenon and wrote a lot about it. And then you have, for example, having surprised everybody is again very interestingly beginning to move away from pure verbhood. And then you have to surprise everyone is to fool them. Oh my God, you see, to surprise, and you begin to, well, yes, I suppose it's a verb, but you can smell something is going on here, It's not so easy to say that this is verbal, And in some logical representation of this, you would probably call it actually nominal. What do I know? You get it? And then you have the passive participle, surprised, you see? And you can see surprised, as a surprised person and so on. Oh my God, well, yes, it's a verb. Can you see? There's a lot to discuss. And then you have, he had a surprised look on his face, you see? And surprised, of course, you thought was a verbal form, you see? And I suppose it is, you see? But you would also say it's an adjective. And what's going on here? Can you see? It's all quite complicated, and not such a simple matter. And then you have the adjectival noun. He made a surprise offer. You see? Oh my God, you see? Is that an adjective? I suppose it is. Oh no, it isn't. Oh yes, it is. You see, you could, 5 Spaniards will have 7 opinions about this, as my teachers would put it, right? You can talk about it. And surprise, surprise, he passed the exam. You see, and you get a kind of surprise that is even in English, almost in the manner of Chinese. You see adverbial. Surprise, surprise. You get it? Surprise. And then you have surprise is an emotion, which again is different from the autonymic. Surprise is a noun. You have it? So you have these different nouns. Can you see? What I'm trying to do in this class actually is to train up in you some kind of sensitivity towards these subtleties, right? And not some kind of mechanical subsumption technique of, putting every phenomenon in Chinese into a box. You see, I would much rather train up in you a sense for the subtle nuances that invite very subtle discussions of the language. So, let us then have a look now in this spirit of the problem of nouniness. Let's have a look at how does nouniness differ from verbality, and is that distinction actually mechanically transcendental in the sense that it moves from one language to the other, right? Can we actually say, that there is such a thing as a distinction that is clear between nouns and verbs in Chinese? We've already seen that it isn't all that clear in English either, but is there something comparable? And we find there is. We can say Fang is firstly square and secondly square. See, English is like Chinese in this way. So we have, it is square, welcome, it is square, and it is a square. And we would now need, in the spirit of Hadge Ross, to ask a very fundamental philosophical question. See, how exactly is that distinction between is square, which is verbal, and is a square, which has a nominal predicate? You have it? The meanings are different, but does that, or does it not, translate into Chinese as distinct? You see what I mean? Is this something which, for the Chinese, is clearly distinct and importantly distinguished by the grammar? And so we look, we say, 不方, and we say, 非方也, right? And we say that Chinese does have this distinction between a predicate 方 be square, which would get 不, and a predicate be a square, which would be fei. And note that in the spirit of our dear friend Hadge Ross, we would say both be square and be a square are actually predicates. So nouns are predicates, according to Hadge Ross and his school of thought, except that he doesn't have one, which makes him so charming. You see, he does not impose a school of thought on those admirers of whom he has in the thousands among linguists. So we have this, and we have now the logician Hui Shi, who says, 举不方. And in the spirit of Hadge Ross, we now must really ask, this is all very complicated. Firstly, the 举, the t-square. Does this refer to any t-square in this world? No, it doesn't. You see? Because this man, Hui Shi, is actually very much like Heraclitus, the pre-Socratic philosopher and so on, you know, a real egghead, and he's saying something very fundamental, not about this t square or that t square or these t squares here or those t squares there. What he's saying is the t square. You see? The t square. Quite abstractly, you see? That object, wherever it is, wherever it can occur in this world, is Buffon. What does he mean by that? This is your responsibility. What does he mean by that, Buffon? It is a t square, it is used to measure whether something is square. What does he mean? Is he just talking nonsense?
So he's saying that our mathematical ideas can't be found in nature?
That is a very abstract way of putting exactly the right point, right? Any physical object could never conform to the ideal of the rectangular. Why? Because the perfectly such and such is never seen physically. The closer you look, then this thing is not even straight, you know, it just looks like that. If you look closely enough, you know, there's no straight line and there's no question of any rectangular structure. You get it? So, the standard by which we judge whether something is rectangular itself is actually, funnily enough, not rectangular. We call this a paradox. And we say that the ancient Chinese actually were, on this occasion, on an incredibly advanced level of abstract consideration of philosophical analysis. Right? This is as abstract as you get in Greek philosophy also. Yes?
What time depth are we talking about?
Well, 370 to 310. But I wasn't there, and he may have been born a year earlier or later. I wasn't there. But he was a logician who, and here cometh the close resemblance to Hadge Ross, you see. He was a real egghead and a wizard with logic, but he greatly enjoyed the use of logic to show these very paradoxical affairs of our world, which we handle and which seem to go against every logic. Like here, this paradox, you see, is really quite exciting. If you learn nothing else in this class, you will have learned a lot. Basically, he says, the concept of mathematics, in mathematics, of the rectangular, is never perfectly present in any possible physical object. It may be that you have to look very closely, but if you look closely enough at any object, it's not going to be rectangular. And he understood this. And how he could have done that in the 4th century BC? Well, because he was possessed of something which I find crucial in all the truly good linguists, and that is a sound sense of humor. And you see, a delight in what seems irregular, no? What seems paradoxical, and so on. You see? Yes?
Is this an isolated example of, in Chinese philosophy, of talking about what you could call Platonic archetypes?
Well, no, and in chapter 32, I believe, of my favorite book, Zhuangzi, you have a series of, I believe, something like 23 such paradoxes. So it is a sustained, it's a sustained form of thought, For example, he would say that the shot arrow never flies. Now that is, to us, it 不飞. You see, it never flies. It never moves. It never moves. Why? Because at every point that you choose, it is going to be somewhere and doesn't move. So you've got this, it never, at no point in its life does it move. Oh my God. See? And you can see these people were having a very good time together, Hui Shi and the philosopher Zhuangzi, where Hui Shi derived his delight from the analytic joys that I believe have made also, have given so much joy to Hadros and his followers. Right? This kind of analytic delight in a close analysis of reality, which is not neat, and its comparison to a conceptual realm of mathematics and so on, which is neat, right? And it's interesting that this opposition then is an opposition that is not local and parochial to the Greek world.
It's there in the Zoroastrian world as well. The
Yes.
Atu
Yes.
is an abstract, almost celestial
Yes.
kind of concept that you never find a good instantiation of.
Yeah, yeah. And you, of course, here we have something very interesting, that it is, there is a kind of mathematical, calm insistence on this general pattern. You know, it's really quite remarkable. So let us then say, 方之一面 非方也 is wonderful. 方之一面非方也. One side of a t-square isn't a square. You could say that that is, you know, fair enough. It isn't a square, right? So you have a square, you know, a rectangular form, you see, and one side of it is not a square. 方木之面 方木也. And so you have t-square tree part. One side of a square log is square. And you can see now, these guys were not only interested in a contradiction between a mathematical world and a real world, but they were also very interested in apparent irregularities in what follows from what. And the text that is very important for this is the Mo Jing, the logical classic of Mozi. So, the Moists say, 众无举者谓之方. And if you are stupid, you will translate this like everybody does, as if the Moists here say, what fits my Ju is called Fang. But if we now raise our awareness philosophically, we realize what he's saying is actually that one calls what fits one's Ju Fang. And the examples where Wu works like English you are in the thousands. So, Wu in Chinese actually means you. That is to say, the second person pronoun, which we use in English to refer to French on, or German man, or English one, that second person pronoun in Chinese is the first person pronoun wu and the first person pronoun wo. So, can we have it? We have 不中无居者谓之不方. Right? And we don't say 谓之非方也. You see? But 不方. The verbality is clear. So, that which does not fit one's t-square is called not square. Do we have it? You can see now that the Chinese, when properly understood, as no grammar teaches you to understand it, because in, for example, in Puliblank and so on, you will not learn that wu means you. So, when properly understood, you can see here that the ancient Chinese are understood precisely to establish the conventional criteria why something is, rightly or wrongly, called fang. Right? Can you see what I mean? It is the critical attention to the use of something that isn't fang, namely the ju. Get it? You use that to decide what you will call fang. Oh my God. Can you see the excitement? You know, this is the joy of life, you see, and it is the joy of recognizing in ancient China this incredible tendency to think very precisely, abstractly, and to express that thought very convincingly in classical Chinese, but in such a way that our current grammars will not give you access to, because the grammars are too poor. So you can see, I hope, that my attempt to make you read these texts with this close analysis to semantics and structure is actually a way of trying to enable you to appreciate one of the greatest traditions of intellectual history in antiquity, namely the Chinese one. So it's not just, you know, a curiosity, we would like to know exactly what they said and so on. No, no, no. This is actually some of the finest thinking that has been going on the planet at this stage, that is being articulated in a very subtle language which we need to understand closely. So, you now have something even more complicated. 是以方与不方皆可得而知之. 是以 such use, therefore. The square and the not square all one can obtain and understand it, them. So, thus, both squareness and non-squareness, oh my God, 不方, right, is here itself nominalized, you see? And of course, you know, the ancient Chinese, if they had heard our theory of grammar, you know, they would say, you know, it serves old Christoph right. The thing is negated by bu and it's a bloody abstract noun. Serves him right, you see? Beautifully absurd situation. If you see what I mean. We've just said that you know you don't want to be negated with bu when you are a noun. And here we have something negated with bu, which is manifestly nominal. How do I know that it is nominal? Here, there's a standard. What is that standard? Can you say that? Can you see it? It's given away by the structure of the Chinese. Can you say what it is? It is the particle yu, which always stands between two nouns. So that's what does the trick. This yu, with, cannot stand between anything other than two guys who are both n. and therefore fallible.
In ancient Chinese?
In ancient
This is
Chinese.
not the case
In
in
ancient
modern
Chinese. We are talking about ancient Chinese. So, can we just take this to be a very interesting fact? We know by the rules of the language that 不方 must be a noun because 不方 is the second member after yu with. Given that, we then better had Christoph, we have him in a corner. He had better explain to us why we are staring at bu here, right? And the answer is that bu fang is a VP, which has an understood head, namely the character of, right? The wu fang xi, if you say, or if you want to do it in modern Chinese, right? This kind of wu fang 这个东西 the wu fang hood, the wu fang hood. You get it? So I get out of this by claiming that yes, bu fang is a verb phrase, and no, as it functions here, it is an exocentric verb phrase, the head of which is abstract quality, or this thing which is. You have it? So, what I'm saying here is you have, on the one hand, nominalization, and on the other hand, that nominalized thing, 不方的东西, is again abstracted here. See? Because we're not talking about this thing or that thing. You get it? So I'm inviting you to rise to this insight that classical Chinese thought, when analyzed with the kind of techniques that we are using, will turn out to be extremely demanding. And then you get an effect which I would say is quite common with Chinese, and that is that its modern readers very often are simply not quite as bright as the writers of these ancient texts, and therefore unable to reach this pitch of precision. You get it? Which is essential. And what I think good analysis of ancient Chinese grammar should do is should help you to actually predictably and by rules get to these subtleties. I hope you understand what I mean. It's therefore something almost theologically half religious, you see, in the sense that it enables you to actually enter the 意境, the 境界 of ancient Chinese culture. And what 境界 and 意境 is that we must avoid getting into. It is something very central to Chinese thinking, of course. It is an intellectual realm and an intellectual level of awareness, which they had and which it is not always clear that translators have also, if you see what I mean. And that is why it's so important to read these texts in the original. Yes?
So would you say that there is a syntactic operation here, I don't know, ellipsis or of the head or something? Is there anything that you could supply in the way of a nominalizer? Overtly.
Well, of course, you would supply zhe, that which is, you see. But that zhe is here then abstractly, you see, understood in a way that zhe normally is not. And so it is very advanced, you see. But in this instance, I swear to you, I'm explaining this to you as it is and damned. I believe that I'm not making it up. I do believe that there is a large set of such constructions which Thesaurus Linguae Sericae can show you. All the VP, brackets and ends, they are in fact illustrators that help you to understand this phenomenon. That a VP in Chinese, any V, is very often used as a V understood at N. And which N, you see, is exactly the kind of thing that you put your finger on, actually. It is not always clear that, for example, this abstraction morpheme is identifiable in Chinese. You see, we use, sometimes you have de used like that, virtue, and so on. But actually, that is very implausible to imagine that people really thought that this is bufang de, bufang de. No. It's not plausible. What is plausible, it is bufang de. And this je is then understood in the abstract nominalizing sense. And that is, of course. Yes?
Would you say in this example that it's less verby?
Well, exactly. It is, you see, it is deverbalized, you see, and is forced into the omitted head exocentric mode. That's right. And so we have here a case where Chinese words turn out to be very unlike chessmen, which have to move in certain predictable ways, and Chinese actually turns out to be more like football, where the context will force words into new functions that they are not made for, if you see what I mean. So the context imposes grammatical structure. And that is something which the context does not do so much at all to Greek words or Latin words or Russian words, in my experience. So the one thing you have to learn about Chinese is that a word is a little bit more like a football player. Yes, he is an attacker, but by God, you do expect him actually, under certain circumstances, to stand in the middle of the goal, of his own goal, you know, and defend against, in the last minute of the game, defend and so on. So you expect an attacker to see him occasionally, very rarely, in the goal. And actually, as a goalkeeper, when that man has broken an arm. And there you can see that is exactly what happens in Chinese. Occasionally, the most outrageous non-standard functions are allowed when something has broken a syntactic arm. You know, when you can say in the heat of the syntactic battle, something becomes necessary. And a person who has cultivated this excessively much is a certain gentleman by the name of William Shakespeare. And if you read about Shakespeare's grammar, you will see that he is constantly doing things to words that he's not supposed to do. But me no buts, and if me no ifs, you see. So I think I told you before, in this way and in this phrase, Shakespeare is considerably more Chinese than the Chinese themselves ever were. You see, we can, you know, you may call me, a chauvinist, but I think he was more Chinese there than the Chinese ever were. You cannot ifs in Chinese, but you can in Shakespeare. And that's interesting. And also, you cannot be iffy. You see, and so on, right? This iffiness is not a concept you could do in Chinese. So, I'm not saying that Chinese is unique at all. I am saying it is very much like Shakespeare and throughout the system in this sense, right? And if you ever get to read my volume 7 of Science and Civilization in China, I have written extensively about this and given plenty of examples. So you can have a look at this book.
Well, English is really not that different from
No,
Chinese.
no, it isn't.
You can take any noun and press it into service as a verb,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
vice versa. Like you
Yeah.
can Forrest Gump your way,
Yeah.
for example,
Yeah.
right? Or you can petition. Petition is a noun, but
Yeah.
wait,
Yes, you can petition, but it is for this reason that I have, I believe, wisely introduced the numbers where the difference comes out properly. You see, where the use of numbers in Chinese is totally different from the use of numbers in English, and we have many other such instances, as you will see if you look at the books on Chinese 活用, lively use of words. Well, you know, you will see that Chinese is a little more Chinese than Shakespeare's English, actually. But there are certain features that, of course, you can say are present in English, but much more elaborated in Chinese. Can we have it that way? I hope you. We can now go on to this one. 匠人意草棋局. Right? What does he do? 将以量度天下之方与不方. You have it? And here it's not abstraction, but 方者与不方者的东西. Here we don't have the double nominalization and abstraction. Here we have only the nominalization, right? So here he度量 what? He 度量天下之. That's to say, in the world, the 方的东西和不方的东西, and this 的东西, this head, is omitted, right? So this is more straight. You get it? So I hope this has been an interesting introduction for you to the philosophical discussion of what verbality is, you see, and how verbality actually enters into a complex structural set of features which are embedded in each other in syntax. And that is something which I think we have a lot of in Chinese and a lot less of in ancient Greek, for sure. Yes?
Does the Mula Karika,
Yeah.
Nagarjuna,
Yeah.
with the, you know, there's no death without a dying person,
Yes.
a dying person without death, does that fit the same pattern? I imagine it's quite spare in Sanskrit.
Well, I don't think we should get into this too deeply, because Nagarjuna, of course, is notoriously ill understood by everybody, but as you probably know, his works are very importantly transmitted in Chinese, and his thoughts, you see, are accessible to us in this Chinese medium, and it is fascinating to see that the incredible abstraction of Nagarjuna is a kind of abstraction that is not inexpressible in Chinese. So it's very interesting. So for you, you should, you have a very good prospect if you go into the works of Nagarjuna in Chinese. So now we will have to descend a little bit more into school grammar, and I want to use the rest of this class actually to show you as much as we can manage of the variety of verbal expressions in Chinese. So we have the big V, which is 笑, as in 笑约, and already we have a problem. Why? Translate 笑约. Yeah, you see, with a smile. And so we already have, oh my God, you see, you could hear Hadros, yes, indeed, it's adverbial, Christoph. You see, oh my God, what is this, you see? So it's not really laugh and say, but you might very well want to say it is said with a smile. You see, with a smile, oh my God, is this also then nominal? No, it isn't. But you see what I mean. Be aware of these subtleties, you see, the 笑. is already something quite complicated, more complicated than just xiao, he laughed. Right? And if you want to do Chinese poetry properly, which I wish for every one of you, you will rise to this level, then you need this kind of nose for the detail. Because if you don't have that nose, you're not going to enjoy poetry, really. So, you have 大笑, large laugh. What does that mean? Laugh out aloud. You see, 大笑. So, you have 大笑. And you also have something which we all probably, and especially since we are now on, on tape here, we will be 为天下大笑. All of us, especially I am afraid, will be 为天下大笑. Be heaven under, great laugh at. Right? That is to say, will be the laughing stock of all under heaven who can see that we misunderstood our sentences. You have it? 为天下大笑 is V. You see? It is V, that is to say, it is a verbal expression. And you could, of course, specify it as VP. But what the capital V says is an expression that is like 笑 or like 大笑 or like 为天下大笑 and so on, right? It's indifferent. We have it. So, the small v is a monosyllabic verbal constituent of any kind, right? But of course, it never occurs unspecified. You see what I mean? So, normally we say more about a v. We say so much about a v that I think we have about 370 kinds of v. Not all of them will be presented in this class. Right? So here we go. We have 白马, right? V and N. No problem. Then we have 下民, the common people, the capable, and you realize that this is an uncontroversial alternative to 渔民. 渔民 we can discuss, 下民 we cannot. There are no 上民. See what I mean? So this is very clear. So you have the non-restrictive modification actually is quite common in Chinese. And since it is never mentioned in any of the grammars that I know of classical Chinese, of course, you have a problem if you are logically minded. See? Because it's terribly important to see that distinction. Right. So then you have the modifier squish. What is this modifier squish? Well, we are back to our friend Hadge Ross, who would say, for example, 仁者寿. You see that? 仁者寿. That is, he who is 人 will be long-lived, or it is he who is possessed of kind-heartedness is long-lived, right? And so we would say primarily this is V at N. 不仁者 is the opposite of 仁者. And yet, somebody could insist the opposite, right? So here you have this structural ambivalence. I think few people would deny that 仁者寿, the 仁 is V add N. The N is the pronoun 者, right? Then you have the V straight dash add N, which says 有贤者. Now, 贤 is be talented, be worthy, but it is at least as often a talented person. So one begins to think that this can be either of the two. You get it? 先 can be either nominal 先 or verbal 先 modifying, and since in this position, in fact, Chinese so-called adjectives don't get negated, then our decision whether it would be negated by fei or bu becomes pointless, right? Because they are not negated. So we have finally 有胜者, and 胜 is primarily a noun, and most people would take it in that way. That a 胜 then would be, a sage, a person possessed of sagehood. So now we have 地者, right? What is that? Well, Wang Tung says, 地之不地, 久矣. Now we are challenged, right? Di is clearly the emperor. And Wang Tung, whom I love dearly, and I have translated his work, his main work, completely, he writes, it's long since that the Di have not performed as Di. Right? They were Di in name only, but not in behavior. So we remember now, 君子不器. And these people are Di or Budi. They are these, but do not Di. You have it? So the J almost, here, the D is almost the so-called D. Right? Because they did not really D, but they had this title of D. So, 地是不地久矣. Again, you have in 庄子, 然而未地者. But if they did not quite act as Di, did not quite reach the state of behaving as Di, that was because his government was not perfect. Now, can you see? Wei is, of course, a negation. I think it's a verbal negation. Never mind, we can talk about that later. Wei is normally not yet, and here not quite. So you can see from the temporal it can move to the conceptual logical. That's very typical in in all natural languages. So it's quite interesting. Wei in your grammar book, everybody says it means not yet. I can assure you that we have hundreds of examples where it does not mean not yet, but has this derived meaning of not quite logically, right? Has not logically got to the point of, not temporarily got to the point of. Am I making sense? See that? And so, if you look at Wei, it has these two meanings, temporal, logical. Exactly the same is true for the final particle yi with the arrow underneath. That particle is normally temporal, then at that point, indeed, like modern le. But also again, like modern le, actually it can be at that logical, under these logical conditions, then indeed, that is also yi. That is again something you cannot look up in any grammar that I know of that is printed. But you can see it helps if you do this logically, neatly. Then you understand that Wei is here, not yet, you see, but not quite. So we have it Then you have 舜禹尧具地者也. So, 伯夷地者之左也, and so on. You can see these are 地者. We now have to ask, is it the verbal di, right? Be, behave in the proper way of an emperor, or is it the nominal be an emperor, that is to say, have that title? So let us leave this, we must get on. So we have 神圣者王. So we have a VP at end, right? But 神圣 could just as well be a spiritual 圣人. So the 者 could be post-nominal or post-verbal, and we don't know which. Is that clear? We don't know which because 神圣 could be either to be spiritual and sage, or it could be to be a spiritual sage. Why do I say this? Because the 者 here is also currently grotesquely misunderstood in the literature, because it is very frequent after noun phrases, and when it comes after noun phrases, it means exactly the same thing as it does mean after verb phrases, namely the subject of the preceding predicate. Now, you will remember that about 10 minutes ago or something, 20 minutes ago, I told you that nouns are predicates. Right? That's what comes into this centrally, right? So, a 神圣者, if 神圣 is a noun, would be a nominal predicate. Those who are 神圣 are the 神圣, right? They become kings. If we take it verbally, then of course the subject of the verb being to be 神 and to be 圣 becomes a king. You get it? Both are all right. Are you following me even at this late stage? You have it, huh? So, 人治者君. How do you translate that? You can do this for me, Slava. What would you say?
Well, it's the same. It seems like the same syntactic pattern.
It's the same syntactic pattern, and you can here now see, you would say that somebody, that he who is good and wise, and then Jun is ruler, and as in Shakespeare, you see, this word ruler will become verbalized here by virtue of the fact that it's got a subject. Right? Will become a ruler. Will be a ruler. Can you see that? So you have, yes, you have a noun, and it's used predicatively. And that is very common in Chinese, not only here where it's explicit, but also in other contexts which have been indeed identified by the likes of Jim Macaulay and Hatch Ross in English and many other languages, where it's important to take nouns as predicative. So, the kind-hearted and wise becomes a ruler. Is what it is, right? And it could be plural or something that is unspecified. So you have 无勇者长. Can you translate that? Yeah? Yeah, a military and courageous man, Zhang. Yeah, a leader, will be Zhang, will be in charge, will be in charge. And so you can see the 人治者君 has Jun as a nominal predicate, and then here, you see, 武勇者长 has a fairly nominal, a fairly verbal thing. 长, will lead. 长 will be in charge. So you can see the nominal and the verbal predicate come in parallel constructions, and the Chinese principles of parallelism are terribly ill understood because that parallelism crucially involves variation of subtle detailed structure like here. Only then is parallelism actually regarded as beautiful in Chinese. If it's complete isomorphism between syntactic isomorphism, actually in general such parallelism is flat-footed, vulgar,庸俗. You have it? It's not exciting. The exciting parallelism is the parallelism that is there, yes, but involves what the Latins called variatio, 变换, change. And this variation is very important for the enjoyment of poetry, in my humble opinion. So that's it. Verbs. And and we have here the adnominal verb with a contextually determinate exocentric head. So you have 金三强辅以. The three strong, right? They are the three strong states. You see, they submitted. So understood is the Go, and you can't look that up in the dictionary. You look it up in the context. And that is why you have the round brackets. And you can see here, 强 is a verb, negatable by pu, right? But it is now part of an understood exocentric construction in which the head is omitted, the head here being state. So the three strong states submitted is how it's understood. And you can see 强 looks like a verb, actually in some sense is a verb, but functions as a noun. How? Because it is in fact part of an exocentric construction. Do you have it? So those who in dictionaries will say 强, the strong ones, right, and say that 强 is a noun, have it wrong in our interpretation, because what we have in 强 is something that continues to be verbal here, you see, but is part of an exocentric construction. That is how we solve a great deal of ambiguity between the nominal and the verbal use of expressions in Chinese, as you can imagine. So you now have a V add NAB, which is interesting. So you have 生殖, which is an interesting concept in itself. 殖 is meaning, significance of a higher order, right? And 生 here is transferred from literal depth to metaphoric profundity. You have it? So that's how you have a V add NAB And typically that V is going to be used yin, shen, figuratively. You have it? Figuratively. So profoundly for shen. And it's interesting that this kind of figurativeness and the derivation of figurative meanings is very often the same across languages. So just as we have deep thoughts, in English we have 深奥的考虑 in Chinese. And then we have a V at N, that is where the N is predicative. So we have 凡12人. That's quite exciting, actually. Because the 凡 here means 总结来说, so it is kind of to 总结, to it is general. Altogether, you could translate into English. Altogether, 12人, there were 12 people. 12人 is predicative. So you have 12人, a noun phrase, but that noun phrase is predicative without a particle yeah. Can you see that? And so we notice that in Chinese, not only nouns but also noun phrases can be predicative without having the frequent particle in nominal predicates yeah. So, by the way, this is no more strange than the Russian on idiot. So in Russian also you can have, of course, simply a nominal predicate without a copula and so on. And here we do not have a copula. The nouns themselves are predicative. Then we have V ad N. Can you see that? That's an interesting one. So you have a V ad N. A 空地大国. Right? And you can see that it is an empty, large valley, right? The meaning of that is that we say, kung is a verb. Kung modifies something. What does it modify? It modifies something which itself is modified by a V, namely the go. You have it? So, what we have here is a language in which to articulate the precise analysis and comprehension we have of a phrase. And that's all we want to do with our grammar, actually. We want to make precise how we read it. Can you see that? And that's what we do here. We say that kung here modifies not da, but da go. Right? And so, following Bertrand Russell and Whitehead, you see, we have our dots to indicate the bracketing. Do you see that? And as you now will see, these formulae that you are being given here, they are not what you are supposed to learn and then, as it were, subsume under. They are like a language in which to express whatever analysis you propose, you see? And that may very well want to be or need to be an analysis that is different from my own, if you see what I mean. Huh? That's very important. So, we are not here learning to subsume mechanically, but we are learning a language in which to express any prejudice or misapprehension about a construction. Precisely. You see what I mean? And of course, I much prefer a precise misconstrual of a phrase to what we have in our grammar books, which is a kind of 笼统的差不多先生的这个解释, right? A kind of general, non-specific, inarticulate way of taking the phrases. That's useless. I'd much rather see a wrong way, because then we can make progress. That is very much in the spirit of both Bertrand Russell and Chomsky, that you make your insufficient comprehension explicit and thereby make it possible to make progress. And so I assume that our analyses here are never complete, but they are, as it were, a distinct step forward in relation to what we read in our standard grammar books, I would think. So, there we go. We have adnominal verbs, so we have 悠悠苍天, the distant azure heaven. That is a V red, right? A reduplicated V. And there you can see I am introducing here a form V red simply to remind us of a phenomenon of reduplication. And why don't I call it VV, or why don't I call it VP? Well, I don't call it VP because it is of a special kind, involving repetition, and I don't call it VV because these are the bisyllabic words like wei yi, to wriggle, and hu der, butterfly, and so on. These are NN and VV, right? We don't want to confuse that with reduplication. But of course, you could use a different expression for it. But you can see, yu yu chang tian is an example where a reduplicated verb can modify a noun, which is not an obvious thing to happen. It's not very common. But what it here modifies is, of course, if you like, a noun which itself is modified by another adjective. And we could here have said, if we wanted to, that yu is, now listen to me, V dot red, treble dot, add V, add N, and so on. So you could make that explicit, that you have here an N at the end, which itself is modified. And what we are saying is, of course, here, that this is not something that yu is specialized in. Why do you, by the way, have this modification frequently? It is because you have in classical Chinese a preference for bisyllabic, for four-character phrases, cadre syllabic preference, which is very common. Is that okay? So, we now have 为仪式. What is that? A 为仪的事. You can see, you can have a double V, 为仪, which modifies a verb, a noun, a situation. And this kind of VV construction is important because wei alone means nothing, yi alone means nothing, wei yi means to wriggle. This is a loan word from before the time where we can identify the sources. It's a very old loan word in Chinese, and typically the Chinese don't care how to write it. If you look at, I mentioned it before, if you look at the Ci Tong, this dictionary of Chinese variants, then you will see there are at least 24 ways of writing wei yi, and the Chinese writers don't care which to use. There are no strong orthographic standard expectations for these. Why do I mention this? Because it's rather interesting. For most other characters, you do have a tendency to see them in one form or the other, right? And some characters tend to be the standard form and the others are sort of minor variants. But here, no, it's like uhu, if you remember, right? Alas, and so on. So you have orthography very varied. For example, you can write it way, this way, and so on, many others. The situation is as with wuhu. Huh? Right? And so we now have deverbal adverbials. So you have shen, shan. Right? Now that shen precedes and modifies, and there's nothing to write home about. You know, this is as we would expect it. But, of course, your grammar books would tell you shen is an adverb, and I tell you it isn't. Because, of course, you have pushen and you have shen alone, meaning to be intense and so on. So this is a verb, which, so you may, works along the lines of being intensive. It is good. So in a being intensive mode, it is good. You have it. So it is verbal, but the verbal function is, of course, add. V. Huh? So it is in a way like xiao yue, say with a smile, huh? And not both say and smile. You have it? So that's the deverbal adverbials. Then we have rather interesting, 并以成而要之. Now the E, can you see now? It is a V and V, 以成, right? That's the first step. You have it? Then it is post and subject because it is 并以成. The 并 is the 以成的东西, right? It's the thing that is already taking shape. And then you have add s. Which add s? 而要之. And now, compare what you would read about this in your grammars. You would read E already. That's all. And I tell you that this E is actually much more complicated. It is an E, right? Which would precede a verb. And that whole construction come after a subject. And that whole construction actually being subordinate to a main sentence. You get it? So this E is not just already, you see, it is, finish. It is not, already finished. It is already Cheng. Who already Cheng? The Bing. And what about this whole construction? Bing Yi Cheng, it precedes and modifies the R Yao Zhi. Do you get it? So it's, what I'm telling you is that if you want to learn classical Chinese effectively, you need to see the complex syntactic frames which an adverb, or if you like, an adverb like E invites you to think of, right? So you see an E and you think, you see, it's going to be a sentence that is subordinate, and then afterwards another sentence cometh. This is the idiomatic link. You can call that governing or whatever. It governs a main sentence, right? This E invites the thought that probably there is this main clause, you see, and so on. And learning classical Chinese then is to learn to expect that the E is part of a whole sentence with a subject and a verbal predicate, and that that whole sentence is actually subordinate to a main sentence. And that is what you cannot look up in any of your grammars. And that is why I believe that vast majority of those who try to learn classical Chinese don't. That's a fact. It's an observation that you teach 10 people classical Chinese and 8 of them will learn nothing of the kind. And that is because of this failure of, as I see it, the failure of the grammars to make the art explicit, to get people, to give people this structural understanding with the kind of depth that we have here. So, dear, they say together. It's not enough. Look at how nicely we can do this. We can say, it is a V, dear, to be together. It comes after a construction that consists of a transitive verb with its object, namely 语子, right? And that whole construction is adverbial. It's so beautiful. Can you see? It falleth off the tree of knowledge like ripe fruit. You see? And this is how it should be. This is what I do believe the little boys and girls in China learn when they are 6. And that is why they read it, and that is why they can read this so fast. Whereas we, when we are just told that jie means together, you see, are just not being told what you need to understand this. You see what I mean? We're not being told this. I hope you can see here that what we are doing is what in Chinese is called 说破这个结构。我们说破这个结, right? In that we say it cometh after a co-verb 语 with its object 子 or whatever, with somebody together, right? And then modifies a main verb. Can you see that? So here now, I wouldn't be surprised if Hadj Ross could show us that our analysis is wrong. What the virtue of our analysis is that we've made clear our misapprehension, if that's what it is. You get it? We have made it clear how we take it. And that is why we can now make progress and become the wiser when the real syntactic nerds tell us how it is. Does that make sense? So, let's do sentence adverbs now. You have 会. Now, 会 is, of course, it's a coincidence, you see. 不会. In ancient Chinese, it's a coincidence, right? 会. Could also be a meeting. Well, when things come together by coincidence. Now you can see, what is this? It is a V add S. So, 会, it coincided, right? And it's add S. And now, to show you what I just said about Hadj Ross, how he would criticize, I can now do that myself. You see, I can criticize my own analysis. I have to say, 会 is Christoph, it's a clear case of V0. For God's sake. Nothing can be the subject of the verb 会. What are you telling your students? This is not good enough, Christoph, you must pull your socks up. He would say if he was here, I'm sure. Pull your socks up, you've just told them there are these subjectless verbs. Here you have one, and you imagine that it's just any old verb. You get it? Not good enough. Can you see what I mean? So, all right, we can discuss this. Do we want to call these V0? I think we should follow Hadj Ross's suggestion, as I have reconstructed it, and say, this is a mistake. And yet, you can see now, it was useful to first write the V and then be able to develop that analysis more closely by reflecting that in fact it's one of those non-subject having, logically subjectless verbs, right? 会. Very interesting. Huh? So something odd going on here, you can see that. And the fact that you should write V0 doesn't make it uninteresting to write V add S, you see? Because in a sense, it is also a V add S, but you can be more specific. In fact, it is my conviction that you can always be more specific than you are in this kind of analysis. You can always do that. The question is how far you want to go. And in this case, I think my objection would be that it would be very useful to tell the students that this hui is actually a subjectless hui and not any old verb. Can we say that? One of the problems with this hui is that one feels very much that this is verbal, and yet on its own this hui does not occur. We don't just sort of say of something that it huis, we just said it's subjectless. You see? So it is, as we say, a grammaticalized verb that has its function specialized on the ad-sentential. You get it? On the ad-sentential function. That's why we could find it probably in some 虚词词典. Probably, I don't know, I wasn't there. So, you have my my idea here. The hui would, I think, by anybody be felt to be verbal, yes, and yet it is a specialized verb, right? That has that has a lexicalized expectation that it would occur adverbially. Yeah. Is that okay? So in some strict sense, you could say these kinds of specialized expressions could cause one to say, see, we do have adverbs in Chinese. And of course, I would say, no, we have verbs, that to coincide and so on, you see, that are grammaticalized to various degrees, specialized to various degrees. That's the idea. Huh? And I don't sort of lose any sleep over the idea that some people might say this constitutes having adverbs, sentence adverbs. I lose no sleep over that. It is fine. But it seems to me important to realize that the hui is verbal and is connected with verbal uses of that verb. Shall we do? So, Hui Qi Mu Zu Wang, she suddenly died, right? Then we have Bing Tui Bi Fu Ming. That's a very nice one. Bi is bu bi, it's verbal, right? And again, it is specialized. You could call that grammaticalized, you see? You don't just go around and be B normally. You see, you can have some sentences, some usages where B is just, it is necessary, but that's not ordinary. So, B is, what is it? Can you see now? B is add S1 that comes afterwards, right? So, if you use B, it must be something that comes afterwards which is necessary. Get it? B. So the Fu Ming, return command, report back, right? So that is modified by B. What is happening is that somebody Fu Mings, and that is necessary, and that the whole construction is modified by preceding sentences. Isn't that fun? So I would really say that you are here assisting, on the occasion where we are explaining away be, you know, the logic of it, and not just throwing a translation like necessarily after it. You get it? What we're saying is that be very often cometh before a sentence which it says is necessary, and then after another sentence on the occasion of which prevailing the first one was necessary. Do you get it? So that's the idea. So as far as I'm concerned, you can see here that be is, I suppose, necessarily. But oh, see, we can explain precisely what that notion of necessariness has as a framework syntactically in which it occurs. We say that the be comes before and modifies a sentence one, and that whole construction, that sentence one is necessary, is said to be conditional upon what comes before, is modified by the sentence that comes before. Can you see it? When you do that kind of analysis, you know, you feel you get under the skin of the goddamn language. You feel you explain the mechanism by which be comes to function the way it does. And of course, you will then see that a be will have several other functions also, and these will be listed in Thesaurus Linguae Sericae under the word be, with examples and translated and so on. All right, we now have post-nominal verbs. That's amazing. Why should we have that? Let's have a look. So, you have 女乐六. So 六 is to be 6, you see, and of the female musicians there were 6. So you have a very interesting use of vinum. You see that it comes after an n, which is, I suppose, its topic, subject. There are, and so you have here 女乐. By the way, 女乐 is exocentric construction, which means female 乐人. You get it? 女乐. So 女乐人 the is. Do you have that? Yeah, musicians. Right. That's one case. You have here now 受母谦币多. So you have received 母谦币多. There the 多 many, much, can be taken to be a post modifier of the 前币. And here again I have to stress, all I'm saying is that this misapprehension, if that's what it is, on the structure of this, would be expressed as I express it here. You could also read this phrase very ordinarily. How would that be? You would simply say, I, or he received, I received. The by me received 母谦币 were many. You get it? So the by me received 母谦币 were a lot. In which case I have no story to tell. You have it? In which case this is a very boring common and garden main verb to be many. Do you have it? Yeah?
What would you consider the duh? How would you classify it according to this?
The door, this one?
The duh. The first, in the last example, the first.
Oh, you mean you mean this one before?
No, no.
No, where?
In 1.2.1.4.2.1.
Oh, to run. Yeah, we haven't got to it now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, can we say that if we take the phrase 受母钱币多 to mean the money that I received from you, mother, was a lot, then I have no 故事 to tell, right? The whole thing is then straightforward. But we have a surprising construction with 受母钱币, which is not what you would expect in ancient Chinese generally. So that's one way of taking it. I think quite a lot of people would take it the other way, which I am suggesting here, which is that I have received from you a lot of money. And then, of course, the 多 here becomes a post modifier of 母钱币. Or 钱币, in fact, only. Right. Then let's go on. We now have 得病极重. So, he caught a disease, very much like Chinese is very much like English there. He caught a disease, got a disease, obtained a disease, right? Caught a disease, and 极重. That disease was extremely serious, right? And here, I think, many Chinese readers would read it the way that I do, a post modifier of 精. 得病极重, you see, 极重就是修饰这个病. Right? The disease is said to be extremely serious, right? And it's a post modification, and I've seen quite a lot of this in Chinese. But you can often do what you can do here. Namely, you can say, oh, look, Christoph, no big deal. He got a disease, full stop. It was very serious. That's not how the Chinese read it. You see? Is it just an observation on, if you like, ethnographic observation of my teachers? They wouldn't read it that way. They may all be wrong, of course. But they don't say that this is, 得病. And it was very serious. No, you see. They would read this as a post-modification. So our language, I agree, I now insist again, you see, our analytic formulae, they only allow us to make precise and describe exactly how our Chinese teachers were seen to take this. They do not claim, there's no claim here that this is the right way of taking it. You see, that has to be judged by everyone who uses this language. You see, and you may want to disagree. Then again, of course, the Zhong here is fascinating. Why? Because it is being modified by Ji. Right? So you have a post modifier which itself is being modified by an adverb. And there we go. We would call it an adverb, you see, because it is a post modifying verb, right? Which is being modified by Ji. Do you have it? Ji is like intensely, very much. So I hope you can see there is this fascination that we can study the phenomenon that Bai Ma, white horse, is not the only word order that can obtain when a noun is modified, right? You can have the modifier after that noun. So you have in Chinese a little bit of the same effect as you have in French. Vin blanc, blanc vin. It's a very different meaning, but of course in Chinese you can, in French you can have the adjective before and after, and there's a big fuss about what exactly the semantic effect of that change is in French. And there is a significant effect nearly always. But that's not our subject here today. Do we have it? By the way, can you at this late stage see the excitement of it? You see that you have actually post-modification of nouns by adjectives. And these modifying adjectives can themselves be modified by adverbs. You see? I call that sort of making progress in the detailed study of grammar. And I don't think you would regret having got into this. So, for example, 永世牛尾. Very interesting. This is a post-sentential way, which is very rare and very idiomatic. And I learned it from my teacher, Jiang Shaoyu in Beida, who actually was able to show me dozens of examples. So it is not that rare. But that is a very strange post-sentential way. Another one is here, 常与我来. That is a very nice one. That 来 is a verb, 来不来, a verb, right? And yet, as you can see, it is clearly V post-add S. If you now imagine that Hadj Ross was here, you know what he would say? Christoph, you haven't got it. He would say, 来 goes not with the sentence, but only with the predicate of the sentence, right? You get it? So he would say this is not post-add S, he would say that this is post-add V. This 来 is post-add V, come off it, Christoph. Do you get it? The scope of the 来 is always only the verb phrase and not the whole sentence. You see, is 买这个来 is 给我买这个 is the scope of the 来. He would say. And I'm only giving you this example, you see. Yes, I suppose, you see, we can discuss this. Is the scope of 来 the VP predicate, right? Or is it the whole sentence? Well, you know, we must discuss this. So quite possibly this 来 is actually is actually V post-add V, right? He would say. But he wouldn't then thereby, as it were, undercut our analysis. Do you see what I mean? He's only saying, well, Christoph, you know, you didn't do very nicely here, did you? I can see him say that, right? You didn't do very nicely for your students, did you? Because this thing goes with the verb. So we have some more post-verbal verbs here. For example, 如病愈为.
Really?
So if 为 is a grammaticalized verb, then we have here a V post V, right? Post V. And why not post add V? Because in fact it doesn't modify the V, but it always comes afterwards, you see, as an alternative, as an or. And this phrase, by the way, I'm glad you are surprised that we have it, but this phrase is Buddhist Chinese.
Really? Because
Yeah, I think this is by Yu Jing, this kind of thing. Yeah.
we can say that in Mandarin.
Also, yeah.
No, I mean Cantonese.
In Cantonese, yeah. But I'm interested that this form, you know, I haven't seen a lot in pre-Buddhist Chinese. Not I. So, on this note, I would like to thank you for your attention. You can imagine that we could go on endlessly, nearly endlessly, specifying further groups of kinds of uses of verbs. What we will go on next time is do a few more of the verbs, and then we will do a complete survey of the particles. After that, we will have some very exciting further material to go through, because we don't only want to do this mechanical analysis, but we also want to look at some more philosophical issues concerning the way in which classical Chinese grammar interacts with modern Chinese on the one hand, and also interacts with such literary forms as the Huiwen, the palindrome, and so on. So, thank you very much.